Back to work, everybody. Holiday is over. It is time to get back and grind it out for the last, month and a half of summer. We just got through 4th of July weekend, and seemingly was a very successful weekend for Fort Collins. And actually, my family and I went up to Red Feather this weekend and watched their fireworks show at Lake Hiawatha. And I will say, if you get the opportunity to go out there, get out there a touch early, but people start to really fill in right around 7:45, 8 o'clock with the show jumping off at 9:30. But the landscape and views are beautiful. And I would say for like a small community like Red Feather, it punched way above its weight class. I don't think it necessarily beat out Fort Collins, but I would say it was a unique show. But all that being said, it was a successful weekend. Started off early on Friday morning with the Firecracker 5K, which is a great event. If you're looking at doing something next year, it's something where you get there 7 o'clock. The race starts at 7:30, an hour long. A lot of people are walking. Some people are running. And then right after at 9:30, they've got the pros running. And so it's pretty cool to watch. And then from there, food trucks all day long. And then there's a parade. There's baseball games, fireworks. I mean, it's a great day in Fort Collins. So it was a great long weekend in Fort Collins, 4th of July weekend. Weather was fantastic. Actually, on the morning of the run, it was sunny yet sprinkling right before the race, and then stopped, and it was perfect weather the rest of the day. So, knock on wood, we get some good weather the rest, of the year, rest of the summer, as we head into kind of that July timeframe. One of the things that I'm going to talk about as far as things to do the remainder of the summer, now it's great time to get out there and tube. We were heading up to Red Feather this weekend, and we noticed a lot of the parking lots along the Poudre River were full, and I was trying to think about why that could be. But now the flows of the Poudre River are at a level where it's pretty safe. Obviously, definitely look at what kind of your skill level is, wear a life vest, but you're getting to a level of water flows that's pretty safe down in the lower flatlands. Obviously, whitewater rafting and things of that nature are better for up in the hill country, mountain areas, but it is time to go enjoy a lazy float down the river. Other than that, there wasn't a ton of news to report. It was fun to see Isaiah Stevens, who's a CSU basketball player, get reunited with Neat Clifford at Sacramento Kings. And it's just fun watching some of these CSU athletes join together and excel in post-collegiate sport life. Also, CSU is now, or they're a part of the Pac-12. I think next year is their first official launch of the Pac-12. And they added a school, Texas State, and we've had a lot of people actually on the channel saying, hey, we're from Texas State. We're excited to come watch CSU in Fort Collins, and it gives us an excuse. So Texas State was added to the Pac-12. Now, this is live in Fort Collins, where we come every Monday at noon talking about things that have happened the last week, things that are happening, and then city council review, which we're going to jump into this week. Big things that we're going to talk about is the strategic trails map that that they've voted the resolution on. So that's going to kind of be our guiding strategic plan for our trails moving forward. And then also we had a vote on ordinance 106 and 107, a second reading on 106 and a second reading on 107, but with two options for short-term rentals in Old Town North. We spoke about it a little bit last week in regards to how many short-term rentals are in Fort Collins and how many are in this specific area. So that being said, if you have any questions while we're going through this, feel free to comment, ask, or if you're watching this on a rerun, comment below and I will get back to you, pretty quickly. But let's jump into the city council, and one piece of news that I think is relatively important is Susan Katowski is going to run again for District 1. So this November, you will have Susan Katowski, Chris Conway, and I don't know what other people who are running are going, but those are going to be at least two people that you can vote for in District 1. that's really coming up relatively quick. So we're going to start to see some campaigning for mayor races. There's 3 city council seats that are up, and then additionally some other amendments and charter amendments that we're going to be voting on. So that will start to be in front of you sooner than later. You thought you got away from the elections last year. Well, they come around every November, it appears. One thing that I thought was really interesting, so we're going to jump in. I'm going to start to share my screen about the strategic trails map, because obviously one of the things that people love about Fort Collins is our lifestyle. And I think our trail system in Fort Collins and our protected bike lanes make it a very attractive area for people to get out and recreate, actually commute to work, active modes of transportation. But we've got a strategic trails plan that's really going to be our guiding principle for the next 50 years or so. They'll look at it again and they'll adjust as needed every 10 years or so, depending on where we're at and how everything's progressing. But it was a little bit of kind of like, I don't know, told me how short life is, because this trails map is built out over the next 45 years, which puts me in my early 80s. Hopefully I'm still riding my bike, getting out there and being active. I think I will. My grandparents are extremely fit for being in their mid 80s, and he still goes out and skis. So I'm hoping I'm kind of like them. But I was like, geez, 80 years old. I mean, this trails map is not for me. This trails plan is for my kids and their kids to enjoy if they happen to stay around Fort Collins. So built out over the next 45 years, around $330 million total build out, I believe, adjusting for inflation. But let's jump in and I will share my screen. And if you guys, again, have any questions, feel free to comment below. Big thing I just wanted to note here is that this was a 16-month period with a lot of people, getting community input, what our city plans were, our needs, our kind of areas of need. But this went over the last 16 months before being voted on this last Tuesday to be adopted. So that was the biggest thing that I wanted to show here. This plan is available on the City of Fort Collins website if you want to go through it. I think it's 400 or 500 pages or so. It's a substantial plan, but I just went through and picked out, maybe not 400, 500, maybe it's like 200 or 300 pages, but I just went through and picked out the 12 images that I thought were really applicable to what we want to look at. The proposed trail map has 57 additional miles of major and minor trails, 27 proposed grade separated crossing at major roadways and railways, 7 at railways, and then also waterways as well. So that's kind of something to take note of, which really does make the ability to ride to work. Like, I was talking to a friend of mine who lives in Timnath, and he drives we have a guys group that meets on Wednesday mornings, and he likes to ride his bike for recreation. But the reality is it probably takes him 15 to 20 minutes to drive in. Whereas if he jumped on the Poudre Trail, which goes under I-25, has no real stops along the way, it might be as quick of a bike ride as it would be a car ride into Old Town for him from Timnath. And that is something that I think is, one, extremely important for our safety, is having these overpasses, underpasses, rail crossings, all of that kind of stuff. Because, but then additionally, it makes it a quick, accelerated trail system for people to get from one place to another. And we'll go through what the priority of those trail crossings are. Now, we can build an estimated, if we go on the accelerated, 2.5 miles, but really we're probably closer to 1.5 miles of trail on average per year. So this, again, is a 45-year build out to get our 57 miles additional of trail. So in the next 15 years, we should see an additional 20 miles, which is 50% more mileage than what we currently have. So while that seems like a really long time, I can tell you the 45 miles of trails, which I'll show you all the trail systems here shortly, it's going to add a substantial amount of bandwidth to our trail system. Here is the proposed trail map. I want to zoom in just a touch. Yeah, that's probably good. Yep. All right. There we go. So this is our current trail system is all the red lines, hard red lines. And then the ones that you see in green are our near-term trails that are proposed to be built. So you'll see a lot of them are going to be in this northeast quadrant. This is Long Pond, Richards Lake, Lindenmeyer Lake out here, and this is Terry Lake. So we're going to see a lot of connectivity from the northeast, which is what we really don't have right now. So this will go through, essentially Montava. Montava would be right here, roughly. This is right to the right of Maple Hill, and this is Saunders up in here. So you'll see a lot of development on the northeast side in the near term, as well as connecting this west side to the Poudre Trail. So this is the Fossil Creek Trail, which I love, which winds into the Spring Creek Trail, but there's no real connectivity on the west side of town. One thing that I've talked about in the past is how there isn't great trails on the west side of town, but that's also because there's a lot of Old Town, there's slower traffic through here, so you kind of get trails and bike paths, not necessarily trail system, but this would connect on the west side, which would be pretty darn cool, and get you really all the way up to Bellevue up here. And then from there, the midterm, again, still in the northeast section, but then we're going to connect on the south side, which this south side, there is a phenomenal Loveland Trail. And the Loveland Trail, I believe, is actually right by the Power Trail. So the Power Trail kind of ends here. But there's this huge Loveland loop that I've gone through. It's a wonderful trail, but this will connect you essentially all the way to I-25 and around Duck Pond, and then all the way to Coyote Ridge Natural Area over here. But that's in the long term. And then in the long term, our southeast, where you kind of are going to get, essentially this is Strauss Lake over here. Once we get this all built out, we will see these trails connect, and then even northeast as well. So really a pretty exciting thing. A lot of our interior trail systems are already very strong, but there will be connections as needed to make them, even stronger. Okay, coming on down here. Here's the state of our trail system. So we talk a lot of times about how there's 45 miles of paved trails, but that's not necessarily like all of our miles by any means. We have 46 miles of major trails, including the Mason Trail, that is City of Fort Collins owned. Then we have 34 miles of minor trails, 6 miles on campus at Colorado State University. And then we have additionally 13 miles of HOA trails that some are available, accessible to the public. Some are not. Some you just take and you use anyways. I will say specifically, there are some that I know of that I ride on that I think is private to the HOA, but who's counting? And then there's 42 grade separated crossings, which is just awesome. It just tells you how many roads you're avoiding crossing with, whether that be kids, yourself, going to work. So just pretty awesome. 2.5 million trips a year are being taken on our trail systems. Let's see here. Okay, and that's what I wanted there. Here, I just wanted to say the annual cost to maintain our existing major paved trails is $450,000 a year. Some of these trails are getting to be aged, a little bit older, so just kind of it's just important that we keep them up. Here are our near-term trails. So this is basically like what you can expect over the next 15 years as far as trails go. So I'm not going to go through each one of these. This ultimately gets to what this is. So a lot of this is going to be just outlined here. But this is as far as like where, if you live near around, Spring Creek Trail, to Jessup Farm and you want to be able to jump onto the Spring Creek Trail, like where in the flow of trails being built am I? And well, you can see, well, we're probably after the Fossil Creek upgrade along South Lemay at Paragon Point. It's exciting because that's right where I am. So I wonder what that upgrade is. And then here we go. I wanted to just I wanted to talk about how we are going to be building out on an estimate 1.5 miles per year, which is why our 57 miles gets us at a 45-year planning horizon. Now, depending on how we get funds and grants and things of that nature, it could be decreased to, instead of 45 years, 25 years if we have our accelerated vision and have better funding sources or more funding sources, I should say. Here, I just thought this was interesting as far as the estimated cost. I mean, you know, we've already built out 45 miles. So if the high point was 239 million for 57 miles, you know, you could assume that building out the 45 miles is probably close to 175 million to 2 million. So 200 million. So after all said and done, we have about $500 million worth of assets in our paved trails when this is fully built out. So definitely, but it's going to be a cost to maintain and keep this up, which I believe we've already got, you know, built into our budget and things of that nature, or planned for our budget. So should be good, but it is crazy. Look at this. The cost to build 1 mile of trail is going to be anywhere between about $1 million to $3 million. Whew. Pretty crazy. But a phenomenal asset and resource to those here in Fort Collins. Here are our grade separated crossings. This is the priority list. So Mason Trail at Prospect Road. That's awesome because that's a super busy intersection. East Poudre Trail at Linden Street. That's cool. Proposed Overland Corridor, Mason Trail at Harmony, Mason Trail at Drake. So that Mason Trail is ultimately going to be this pipeline of commute. Like I said, when I did my week of riding my bike to and from work, I could get to and from my house in 30 minutes, and I was booking it a little bit. But that also takes into consideration there were some crossings that I had to stop at. So Mason Trail at all of these crossings would just be an absolute rocket ship of a trail for people going north and south in Fort Collins. I just thought this was interesting. You know, we have 2.5 million trips per year. And what we would be hoping for is, after our near-term trails are completed, 4 million, midterm 8, and 10 million trips per year once our 57 additional miles are constructed. This is our Vision Zero. They want to have 0 crashes resulting in severe injury or trails annually. And then I think that is it as far as that one goes. Oh, this one I just thought was interesting as far as what they try to build along is our ditch systems. So you can see a lot of our trails actually follow some of our ditch systems and are going to ultimately be built along that. The green is generally going to be agreeable to building trails along their ditch system. The yellow is kind of up in the air, maybe agreeable, and the red is like a hard no. So unfortunately, you know, we do have challenges in this northeast section for whatever reason, whatever ditch that is causing some challenges for the city of Fort Collins to build. So if you got any inroads with those ditch companies, let them know, like, hey, let our trails be built along your ditch, bro. Okay, moving on down. Again, this is just long, short term, midterm, and it doesn't go all the way. It actually goes all the way to long-term plans. So you can see, if you'd like, I can send that to you. Or again, this is a plan that you can look at on the City of Fort Collins website. It's just pretty awesome to see where is your house. If you're like, I need it and I want to see it connected, it looks like it's in the midterm section. So it's probably in the next 15 to 30 years, long ways away. So you can either move, give us a call, or wait that 15 to 30 years and just know kind of when it's going on. All right. Keep on going. I just thought that was really awesome. So that's been approved as a resolution. So this is our strategic plan moving forward, an additional 57 miles over the next 45 years, $330 million build out. Talk about where we are putting our money where our mouth is when it comes to active modes, greenhouse, trying to get cars off the streets and more bikes. So just pretty cool. The mall has been delayed till August 19th as far as the Metro District being voted on and approved. But then the last item that was on City Council this last week was in Old Town North. So City of Fort Collins has roughly 400 short-term rentals. About 0.5% of our housing stock in Fort Collins are short-term rentals. Per some of the individuals that we're talking, they suggest that 3% is a healthy amount of short-term rentals in a community. We don't have a lot of those. We have certain zones that allow for primary short-term rentals, and then we have zones that allow for non-primary short-term rentals. It's a pretty restrictive plan in Fort Collins. So there was a neighborhood, Old Town North, that was built as a commercial district, which allows for non-primary short-term rentals, meaning you don't have to live there, which is a very unique aspect to most residential neighborhoods, which is essentially what Old Town North is. It's a residential neighborhood. Of the 400 homes or so that are in there, 100 or maybe it's 300 homes, a substantial portion of the homes are non-primary rental short-term rentals. And so this public comment was relatively contentious in the city of Fort Collins. I will say one of the things that came out of this is that the city of Fort Collins, not this council, but the next council, they had discussed that, you know what, we probably should look at our short-term rental regulations and laws and adjust to potentially be able to increase, is how I kind of understood it, the supply of short-term rentals, just maybe a little bit more dispersed throughout the community, because having 25% of your short-term rentals pool in Old Town North probably is not a great disbursement or, good for this neighborhood. So there was clearly more owner-occupied residents talking about how they don't want short-term rentals, period, in their neighborhood. But what they didn't want was the ability to transfer the license at the time of sale. So Ordinance 106 said, hey, we're changing the land use code to change the zoning of this Old Town North. So that was approved 7-0 in the first reading and approved 7-0 again in the second reading on consent calendar. Then Ordinance 107 had two options. Option one was you can transfer your short-term, non-primary short-term rental license at the time of sale within I think it's 30 days. And option two was you can still operate your short-term rental, but you cannot transfer the license at the time of sale. And it was a pretty contentious public comment. There was 22 individuals who spoke about this specific item, but then additionally during public comment, I would say the majority of the hour long of public comment was focused around the short-term rental as well. Pros and cons on each side were, I should say not pros and cons. I should say the sides of the fence were, okay, the primary or the residents, year-long residents who live here are upset that they're not able to build community with their neighbors because, well, their neighbors are only going to be there for 3 weekends, or, they're partying, or what's the point? And they're upset because this residential neighborhood is now a hotel neighborhood, and they're mad that that is the case, and they don't want that to be the case. The people who are the primary, non-primary short-term rental owners are saying, hey, listen, this was the zoning. This was how this was built. We are just playing by the rules of what the zoning is and the land use ability of our property is. And we shouldn't be punished for that. It should be on the burden for the person who's buying the house to understand who and what can buy here. And I could see the conversation of both. Ultimately, this neighborhood was an oversight, that it should not have it should have had its zoning changed a long time ago so that it adjusted to what was actually built here, because essentially what their proposal was, or their plan in early 2005, I think, was when this originally started getting built or planned, and then 2015 really get started, or 2010 and beyond really starting to get built out. But it was a small commercial urbanized living type of spots where there could be some coffee shops, maybe some hardware, drugstores, small commercial operations, but not necessarily all of the short-term rentals that came here. And so it's kind of been a loophole of sorts that people have been able to take advantage of. That doesn't mean that the people that took advantage of it are wrong. It just means that the city of Fort Collins and the land use code got messed up. It was a small deal that became a big issue, which is why I got put in front of the city of Fort Collins. Ultimately, what happened was the city of Fort Collins city council members voted 7-0, or excuse me, I think it was 5-0. There was 2 absent. Jenny Arndt wasn't there, and I don't know if I think maybe somebody couldn't vote because they weren't there the entire time. It was voted on 5-0 that option 2, that you can still operate your short-term rental, you just can't transfer it at ownership. And there was a conversation and some pretty big frustrations. And I could imagine if you bought this property, assuming you could buy it as a short-term rental and sell it as a short-term rental, that value of a property is probably significantly different than if you can only sell it to a owner occupied or long-term investor. Let's clarify real quick. Short-term rental in Fort Collins means 30 days or less. If it's 30 days or more, it's considered a midterm rental. So all of these people could still rent it on an executive rental month-to-month basis. They just aren't going to be able to sell it to somebody who wants to operate it as a short-term 30 days or less individual. So yes, as an investor myself, I would be quite upset, but dang, I just bought this $800,000 or $700,000, $1 million house with plans to operate as a short-term rental for the next 5 years because, well, my kid's going to school here. So I actually want to be able to come and stay here for a month during September, during, homecoming, a month during graduation, and, whatever. So I want to be able to personally use it for 2 of the 12 months and then rent it out for the next 10. But when they graduate, be able to sell it to somebody that's already been furnished and all that kind of stuff. Because I will say, when I operated 3 short-term rentals, one of the biggest expenses was furnishing it and getting all of the kind of knickknacks together so that this could be a successful short-term rental. Well, that's an investment that if you aren't there for a long term could be a substantial investment that doesn't necessarily see the return. So overall, thought it was a really interesting conversation. Option 2 was selected. So these people can operate their short-term rental, but once they sell, it's going to go to a long-term investor or a owner occupied. It also brought up to me, I was just watching somebody, the facial expressions on city council of when one side or the other was talking and kind of the scoffing and the frustration and annoyance. And I do know, because our HOA went through this about a year or 2 ago, where people were just pissed off and wanted the HOA board to stay or wanted the HOA board to go. And regardless, they were, going head to head. I'm like, man, we're neighbors. And that sucks. And it was a interesting, view of watching people just scoff at how their neighbors believe that they should use their property as a short-term rental or they should not be allowed to use their property as a short-term rental. And I was like, oof, man, neighborly love right there, right? Anyways, moving on to things to do this weekend. I did leave a comment of or a question last week on what do you believe, should short-term rentals be allowed or not? And it was 66%, 33% that short-term rentals should be allowed to be used. I would say probably the question that I'm going to pose to everybody this year is, or this week, is probably something along the lines of buying a property, understanding its use and capable uses is an important part of buying the property. And if those change while you own the property, what should the ramification be? Should these people who bought these properties, assuming they could sell them as short-term rentals because of the land use code, bring a class action lawsuit against the city of Fort Collins because of the loss of tens of thousands of dollars? Maybe. I don't know. It's a really interesting conversation because obviously when we're buying $500,000, $2 million properties, it's a pretty substantial investment, and one in which you should know how you can use your property and even what can be used around you. So really important conversation pieces to be had. But this week, not as exciting as last with the 4th of July that has come and gone, but the downtown summer sales event is going on from July 10th through the 13th. This is our summer sidewalk sale. So head downtown Fort Collins, Old Town Square. You're going to see tents, pop-up sidewalk street sales, really great deals all over the place, July 10th through the 13th. So go check that out. As I talked about earlier, tubing down the Poudre, we were driving up to Red Feather. Lots of people parked along the Poudre River, and I was trying to figure out why that's the case. And the reason is because people are now, after 4th of July is really a great time where the flows are much safer. That's not to say they are fully safe. So make sure you are fully aware, because there are people who die on an annual basis, usually in the May and early June time periods on the Poudre from tubing. And also there's rescues down the Poudre every year, all the time. So, go at your own risk. There's no lifeguards. You're floating down the Poudre. It's a blast. It's a fun time. I will say this, wear the sunscreen. Okay. I had a buddy of mine, and, he was just absolutely roasted on his chest and stomach because you're sitting on that tube potentially for an hour or two going down the Poudre. So make sure you're lubed up with some sunscreen. I was just talking to Janae about this when we were up at Red Feather, that the DU Mountain campus, there's ropes courses there, and then there's guided rock climbing as well. And it's on a weekly basis, $79 per person. There's 40 plus bouldering and sporting climbing routes at the Kennedy Mountain campus. So something to do literally 45 minutes away, maybe 55 minutes away, depending on where you are. But from Fort Collins, $79 a person on a weekly basis at the DU Mountain campus. So something definitely fun to do. I don't celebrate Walmart too much by any means, but there's a grand reopening at the Fort Collins Walmart off of South Mason. There's going to be food trucks and fun. So if you're excited about that, which, it is kind of the Walmart that's closest to us. So I do go there and shop, spend my dollars there, right, wrong, or indifferent. But it's been kind of closed off, going through remodels, but that's reopening this July 11th, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. food trucks. I don't know why, but we love food trucks. I kind of got not grief, but somebody made a comment about how the food trucks in Fort Collins are by no means a deal. Where I believe it was she was coming from was California, where they actually were a deal. So you'd go to get to the food truck food, but it would be a discount, and you'd have fun. You'd sit on the ground because, maybe they're not paying for waiters or overhead or anything like that. So they can give you this discount, but that's not really the case in Fort Collins. And I will say, no, I think when we were at Red Feather, it wasn't a food truck, but it was kind of just like a pop-up tent where they were giving funnel cakes, which were delicious, and burgers. And it was for 6 of us, $80. So it was, we didn't buy any, I think we had 2 drinks. And then, basically 4 burgers and 2 hot dogs. So you're not going to get the big discount at these food trucks, but it's just kind of fun. It's something to do. Always enjoying something to do here in Fort Collins in Northern Colorado. Developments under review. There's still, ADUs coming across the board, things of that nature, but nothing else really to report. I don't have anything else to discuss this week. I am open to, talking a little bit more if you guys have specific questions about, short-term rentals or anything along those lines, because it can be a little bit confusing here in Fort Collins. So if you have any of those specific questions, feel free to give me an email or a call, and I'm happy to talk you through those. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoy your week back to work. Like I said, holidays are over, no more. But we are halfway through the summer. I just saw my son's potential kindergarten teacher, and I was like, hey, we'll see you soon. It's just about over a month and a couple of weeks before school starts back up. And so that's right around the corner. So make sure you spend some time with family, friends, whoever, get the last bit of summer in before school starts back up. But I appreciate you guys watching. Until next time, have a great day.